Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Council, which is being held virtually. We will now hold a 1-minute silence in respect of former Councillor Rita Briggs, who served as a ward councillor for Home Valley South for 17 years and the Mayor of Kirklees from 1997 to 1998, and also for the residents of Kirklees and the wider communities who have sadly lost their lives due to the current pandemic. Thank you for that. Does any members want to speak? Councillor McBride.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say Rita was a living proof of the value of backbenchers. She was a very able and articulate lady who had no other ambition than to work in her ward. She was very much like Annie Smith. The work of these two was invaluable and so much appreciated by people in their wards. Rita will be remembered with great affection by her colleagues in the Labour Party and even more by the people of Home Valley South, for whom she was a champion who stood above party. And I do know that Donald shares my sentiments from the opposition. I'd like to invite him to follow me.
Yeah, I would like to do that. Yes, Rita was a very good councillor and a very good friend of mine. In fact, as she got older, if she had any driving to do when we were going to the same meeting, I used to take her with me and bring her back home at night. That's how we used to operate. And when our children were small, my first wife and Rita used to share driving, taking the kids to school. So that's how much we knew Rita. She was a lovely lady, and she'll be sadly missed. She will be sadly missed. Thank you.
And get the permission to speak, and then it will come on the screen and we will bring them through. So Councillor Walker, please. Rob Walker.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to express the condolences on my behalf and on behalf of Combe Valley Constituency Labour Party. As Peter says, Rita was a lovely woman and an absolutely excellent councillor who did a great job representing people in Home Valley South. I last saw her at the 125th anniversary celebrations of the Combe Valley Constituency Party at the university, and it was great to listen to Rita and Molly, who was still alive at the time, reminiscing about their experiences as councillors and as members of the party. So, yeah, she will be very much missed and was a great servant to Kirklees. Right, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mohan Sokal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor, I know Rita Briggs, and I had the opportunity to work with him when she was second time elected in 1990. Then I worked with her from 1990 till she retired on year 2002. Rita's husband was my good friend, Bruce Briggs. He was, we used to sit on the Huddersfield magistrate bench, and they were both nice people. And Rita was so lovely lady, as Rob has said, yeah. So everybody, she appreciated her that time. It's sad to lose Rita. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Davis.
Yes, I met Rita a few years ago. There was a request that came in for somebody to go and help put up a labour stake in her garden during one of our campaigns. And I'd just like to echo what an absolutely lovely lady. Spent well over an hour there having a cup of coffee and a chat. And I went back a few months later with my wife as well. And we did the same. And you know, it was really a nice experience to listen to what she'd done, how she'd come through the times when it was very difficult for women to move through and move up in career terms. So just really like to echo what an amazing, lovely woman, and she'll be sadly missed.
Thank you. Councillor Shabir Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very, very briefly, I didn't realise that there were so many tributes that were going to come in, but very, very quickly, I got on the council and Rita came off, but I didn't know Rita when I used to be in the Labour group, and as leader of the council, I'd just like to reinforce and echo what everybody has said. She will be missed. She was an exemplary councillor, and my condolences to the family. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. I think no further speakers. This evening, we have two substantive agenda items, a report from the solicitor to the council regarding attendance at meetings and a key discussion item on COVID-19 community response. The contents of the agenda has been agreed by the chief executive in consultation with myself and the group leader to enable the meeting to focus upon the key discussion item. It has therefore been agreed that the councillors and members of the public who wish to ask questions should refer them to a meeting of cabinet. CPR 1823, which restricts the key discussion to a maximum of 60 minutes, will not be applied on this occasion. Please can I remind members to only speak when I have invited them to do so, and use the chat function to indicate if they do wish to speak. Please do not use the chat for any other purpose other than requesting to speak. There will be a 10-minute break in the meeting at an appropriate time. We have received apologies from Councillor Dodd and Councillor Lukic. Can I ask group business managers to advise if there are any further apologies for absence?
No, only Councillor Dodd and Councillor Yusra Hassan, as you said, Mr. Mayor, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Mohan. Anybody else? No? Okay.
No.
Can we move on to item 3? I move that the minutes of the meeting held on 12 February will be approved as a correct record. Deputy Mayor? That seconded?
No.
In the absence of anybody else, I'll do it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Can we show of hands, yeah? Can we have a show of hands? No, that's carried, yeah? Yeah. Item 4, does any member wish to declare an interest in any of the agenda items? Please. Yeah. No? Please can I remind members to complete and submit a declaration of interest form. Item 5. Council is asked to consider that the requirement for an elected member to attend a relevant number of qualifying council meetings be relaxed until 7 May 2021. Councillor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the absence of a councillor from qualifying a meeting of the authority, they would ordinarily lead to their disqualification as a councillor, shall be authorized to 7th of May, year 2021, in order that any member who do not have the opportunity to attend a qualifying meeting prior to and during the pandemic are not at risk of an advertent disqualification. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Richard here, yeah, I'm seconding that, and reserve the right, please.
Thank you. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Has there any comments on this? We will now move to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, you're voting on the recommendations moved by Councillor Sokol. When I say your name, if you could please indicate for, against, or abstain. Councillor Ahmed. For. Councillor Akhtar.
Yeah.
Councillor Allison. For. Councillor Armour.
For.
Councillor Asif.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
For.
Councillor Bolt. Councillor Bolt.
Come on, Martin.
Bolted.
He's normally so shy.
Councillor Burke.
For.
Councillor Butt.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Paola Davis.
For.
Councillor Paul Davis.
For.
Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Donald Firth.
For.
Councillor Eric Firth.
For.
Councillor Goodwin.
For.
Councillor Granger Mead.
For.
Councillor Greaves.
For.
Councillor David Hall.
For.
Councillor Steve Hall. Councillor Steve Hall. Councillor Holmes.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Councillor Hussain, the Mayor.
For.
Councillor Idale.
For.
Councillor Kaushik.
For.
Councillor Kendrick.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Lawson.
For.
Councillor Lee Hamilton.
For.
Councillor Lee Richards. 4. Councillor Lunat.
For.
Councillor Lowe.
For.
Councillor Lyons.
For.
Councillor Marchington.
For.
Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor McBride.
For.
Councillor McGuinn.
For.
Councillor Munro.
For.
Councillor Murgatroyd.
For.
Councillor O'Donovan.
For.
Councillor Pandor.
For.
Councillor Patrick.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Pervez.
For.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Kath Pinnock.
Yes, Lewis.
Councillor Sarwar.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Simpson. Councillor Smage.
For.
Councillor Anthony Smith.
For.
Councillor Richard Smith.
For.
Councillor Sokol,
For.
Councillor John Taylor,
4.
Councillor Kath Taylor, Councillor Thompson,
For.
Councillor Turner,
4.
Councillor Uller,
4.
Councillor Uppal,
4.
Councillor Walker,
4.
Councillor Warner,
4.
Councillor Watson,
4.
Councillor White,
4.
and Councillor Zaman.
4.
The recommendations are carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That is carried. So we'll move on to item 6 now. This evening's key discussion is COVID-19 community experience. We have received a brief note from the Strategic Director of Health and Care which sets out the Kirklees community response. Before I bring in Councillor Pando, I just want to share my experience throughout the pandemic. I have supported a local community project where we successfully given out around 800 food parcels in support and supporting over 500 families. It's been over 100 days since me and my ward colleagues have been helping with the 2020 Foundation. I have met thousands of people from general public and everyone has been so supportive and have been following the government guidelines. So keep up the good work. I would also like to give a big shout out to all the community groups in Kirklees who have been helping with supporting vulnerable communities within their areas. I have been to see some of these groups. These include COVID-19 response based at Durrell Ilham in Thorny Lees, the Magic Wishing Well in Liversedge, One Nation in Bartley, Chickenley Community Centre, Zachariah Education Centre in Savilltown, Moonlight Trust in Thorny Lees Community Centre, and all the others that I have missed out. You have all done a tremendous job in keeping our community safe. And finally, I would like to thank all the Kirklees Council officers who have been redeployed and have worked tirelessly to keep Kirklees Council functioning safely. I would also like to thank the leader of the council, Shabir Pando, and the chief executive, Jackie Gedman, for keeping me informed in these difficult times. Thank you. Councillor Shabir Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to you all. It's nice to see you be virtually. And I'd like to thank our officers as well, who have done some great work in making sure that these virtual meetings do take place and we get democracy working to some kind of normality. Mr. Mayor, the coronavirus has caused so much devastation and worry across the world, but it's important that we also appreciate the positives that we can take from this. And we've done some fantastic work, which I'm sure we will hear today from our backbenchers who have been out there in the community. For me, it's something we should all be proud of. The togetherness which I talk about many times, we've seen that operating firsthand, and I can't be more prouder of everybody in Kirklees and every one of the councillors in Kirklees. Our biggest strength, Mr. Mayor, is we have Kirklees where togetherness is our strength. Like the rest of the country, we've faced massive challenges over the last few months. Since 23rd of March, things have moved that fast that if you blink, you miss a crisis. And the crisis situation is occurring on a daily basis. And the way we have pulled together, the way the nations pulled together, it's an exemplar across the world. And the challenge is to deliver services, to care about the most vulnerable, supporting our amazing schools, teachers, and doing all we can to help local businesses has been exemplar, especially in these unprecedented times. Mr. Mayor, I'm proud of the way Kirklees has responded. Proud of the way the councils have responded, its people, its communities, and it's only because of the way we have responded, we can hopefully celebrate as we move forward. As a councillor, it's really a privilege to see how local people are pulled together, supporting each other during these testing times, and each day I look and there's new examples that are coming forward. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my fellow councillors. It's something I really value, and it's something that we can talk about as we move forward. We've all accepted that there's much to do, and on the back of that, I'm really pleased that we've kept the politics to a minimum. Because as politicians, it's very easy to get into the politics, but we've kept the politics to a minimum. We've challenged constructively where we need to, but we've put our communities first. It doesn't matter where we are. That's something that we've done, which is really heartening. There's been challenges, and of course, there's lessons to learn. We've not had a crisis like this since probably the Second World War, and we won't get everything right all the time. But we do our best. We do try and listen, and we do actually improvise as we move forward. We've always got everything, as a priority, and the way everybody's actually worked so hard, not just within our organisation, but within our communities, within the voluntary sector, and within the faith sector. That's what's pulled us through this pandemic, and I hope we can carry on some of that good work.
30 seconds, Shabir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Without further ado, Mr. Mayor, I think one thing I need to highlight is the virus is still very potent, it's very dangerous, and we need to exercise caution and vigilance. Follow the government guidance. Public Health England guidance is critical. Keep your social distancing as per government guidance. And needless to say, wash your hands. Washing your hands is the best way to actually keep safe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I look forward to listening to what others have got to contribute. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Never did I think that the passion for place-based work, and my passion in particular, would come into fruition with councillors at the heart of this. And it's so rapidly pushed it to the forefront because of what's happening in our communities today. I know that you will agree that this has placed significant challenges on our citizens and communities. The response to the pandemic across Kirklees, especially on our most vulnerable, it's also highlighted the inequalities that already exist across this country within our communities here and also here in Kirklees, within our country and here across in our communities in Kirklees, which we're committed to addressing. Despite the challenges, we have local councillors who have stepped up. They have been at the heart of that response. And we have also witnessed that they've been acts of kindness and support that reflect that the very best that the local communities and the public services and what they are doing. So it's from the food banks to volunteering, supporting people, advocating, and there's been much, much more. The volunteers and mutual aid groups and anchor organisations and the third sectors have all been committed in this. They have come together with the council and its partners to deliver a community response that has been fundamental in supporting local people through difficult times. My appreciation does go out, and I think, Mr. Mayor, you've already mentioned quite a lot of these people, but I'd like to say third sector leader, Batley Food Bank, 2020 Foundation, the Moonlight Trust, Zachariah Mosque, Southia Centre has been key to this. We've also had Fusion Housing and the Dewsbury South COVID-19 Action Group, and there's much, much more. So many that I know, and I'm sure that other colleagues, as they rise to speak today, will mention these organisations. The report you have is about we're about to discuss. It's about the work, and it captures the work that's taken place. It's taken place over these many months now in response to what's happened. The approach is indicative of our commitment to place-based working and the commitment about working alongside citizens in true partnership. So this is about bottom-up. Place-based working can only lead to sustainable, innovative solutions that support local services to respond effectively to individuals, families and their communities. We have the biggest opportunity here to lead our communities, facilitate or join support, work in partnership with organisations and the voluntary sector. I thought I'd share with you some of the words that I've come across through citizens, community groups and volunteers in my role as harnessing community capacity, and some of the words that they're using, and they're all up for this place-based working with you. It's looking for a brighter future, collaboration, partnership, connection, community, to be listened to feel some connectedness and to have some hope. This is an opportunity now for all councillors to shape and inform what happens next as we begin to enter the phase of recovery. Again, I say, who better that knows their local intelligence and the support networks within their communities? It's your local councillors. And before I end, I want to say a special thank you to Jackie Gedman and all her staff that have had continuity of service. They've carried on working tirelessly to provide things for us out there. And this is from the back office to the front, where people are out there in our communities. I'd like to also mention a special thank you to all of the K&H staff that have coordinated and worked around the clock to ensure that our food networks and deliveries have been achieved. And believe me, they have helped me. I've been coordinating the one in Chickenley. We've delivered over to 750 families, and without their support, it had never happened. I'd also like to thank you personally, councillors. You're amazing. You've started the journey of place-based working. We can only capture this and run forward with it. It's the biggest opportunity you'll have to work with your communities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kaushik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, everyone. I'm Councillor Manisha Kaushik, proudly presenting the
Got a glitch.
Ask her to switch.
Switch video.
Can you turn your video off, Councillor Kaushik?
Oh, sorry. For more information and support, particularly by vulnerable people when they saw and heard stories about panic buying at supermarket and shortage of food items and other essential day-to-day necessities. I connected the relevant council officers and all communities organizations in my ward who have a reach into those communities and developed an engagement plan to ensure that these population groups getting the support they needed. I organized, Mr. Mayor, 4 community groups, 1 group in Netherton, 2 in Lockwood and Thornton Lodge, and 1 at the Eden Center to support the residents of Walpole and Crossland Moor area. All these groups were supported by the council's ward coordinator officer. The member of these community groups were local young volunteers who knew the area and the community very well. These volunteers helped people aged over 70 with shopping, helping people who could afford to pay for essential items and those who couldn't. Also, all these volunteers bought and delivered food parcels and other essentials to the vulnerable people on request, including those who were self-isolated, children and families, and those with underlying health conditions and people with disabilities. During this COVID-19 emergency, I received several requests to help from the families affected by domestic violence. I used the Hardship Ward Fund to help these families. We, the ward councillors, also worked and supported the anchor based at Paddock Village Hall, who did a brilliant job to help the vulnerable in our ward. Also, I have given advice and support to small businesses in the ward about applying for small business grant with Kirklees Council. But, Mr. Mayor, I'm worried about the increase in unemployment among young people, especially within the Black, Asian, and ethnic minority communities. I am hoping the Labour Council administration in Kirklees will set up apprenticeship and traineeship schemes to help young people find employment. I would like to thank those community volunteers in our ward who have been working tirelessly to help vulnerable people and hope they continue to do so until this crisis is over. I would like to thank the Fox Biscuit Factory who donated many boxes of biscuits to the Eden Center for distribution in our ward. Also thanks to all the key workers but most of all to our wonderful NHS frontline and key staff who proved themselves to be the real superheroes. We are proud of them all. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I would applaud this Labour administration, Council Leader, Councillor Shabir Pandor, Jackie Gidman, Chief Executive, and Rachel Spencer, Director of the Public Health Kirklees, who have done a brilliant job to keep us well and safe during this crisis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Can I just ask members who are not speaking to just put a mute on their button so we don't get any disturbance here. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over the past 4 months, all of us have lived through a time of great uncertainty where none of us has experienced before. We can each quote examples of great courage and generosity, personal sacrifice, resilience, hardship and determination, and I'm sure that members will do so during this debate. But rather than specifics, in my case, I'd like to concentrate on some broader issues and maybe 3 things for us to ponder. Firstly, I think we ought to reflect on the magnificent resilience of our communities throughout the borough. From the very start of the lockdown period, we've seen many of our residents prepared to volunteer to help those less fortunate than themselves. And this has been unbidden and entirely due to the selflessness of individuals and families. Coordinated actions such as food distribution centres, shop and drop services, prescription collection rounds, all were set up in a matter of days by committed people who care. A kind phone call, friendly chat over the garden fence, a socially distanced VE Street party, the regular Thursday night appreciation of key workers all have contributed to a deeper sense of community, which in many places had begun to wither. We mustn't forget either, Mr. Mayor, the part that businesses have played in the COVID response. Many have found new, imaginative and flexible ways to trade, and the great majority have tried their best to retain their employees and make it safer for them to come to work. Mr. Mayor, we should be proud of this community response, and much more importantly than that, we must find a way to hold on to it and to harness it for the future. Secondly, Mr. Mayor, I feel that the whole experience has emphasised the crucial role of local government. Local councils are always the ones to whom everyone else turns to coordinate the necessary reaction to any emergency, and this pandemic has been no different. Some things the council has put in place has worked well, others have not, and I'm sure we all have our opinions on that, but I would hope we have learned lessons from what has been achieved. Personally, I feel the council should have seized the lead on day 1 to coordinate some of the volunteer activity on a micro level when there was a great degree of duplication and uncertainty, rather than wait to see what emerged and then try it together. But our Kirklees officers have worked hard to make the best of the council's efforts. They've adapted their work into new patterns, in some cases entirely reworked service delivery, dispensed an unprecedented amount of government aid to businesses, and those on the front line have continued their work amid their own anxieties, and they should all be thanked. There's also the question of the liaison between local authorities and government and whether this has been totally effective. I think there's much room for improvement there, and of course this needs to be tackled from both ends of the conversation. Thirdly, Mr. Mayor, and most importantly, what lessons do we learn from all this? Now that we're emerging cautiously from lockdown, this is the time to start thinking about the successes and failures of the last 16 weeks. How can we build on the great strengths which have been forged out of adversity? How can the council learn from things which didn't go to plan? Have our communities changed, and in what way have they changed? Has our relationship with the voluntary sector changed? What services have come to be seen by our residents as vital and which not? How does this shape our future offer to residents? And Mr. Mayor, we must start having these conversations now, because if we leave it until after the COVID threat has dissipated, life will return to normal and the temptation will be to let things run as they always did. We have a rare golden opportunity now to reshape and re-energise this council. We must seize the opportunity, and all councillors and communities must feed into a new vision for the district and for the council. Finally, Mr. Mayor, We can never thank enough those who have made personal sacrifices to ensure the safety of others. Sadly, some have made the ultimate sacrifice, and the best tribute we can offer to them is that we all commit to ensure that our post-COVID Kirklees is stronger, fairer and kinder than it was before. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll begin by adding my thanks to our workforce for all the commitment that they've shown in recent weeks, their willingness to be redeployed and to put in the extra work in our efforts to mitigate the effects of the pandemic while still providing services cannot be overstated. The efforts made by the public too to protect themselves and each other have been quite simply humbling to see, and we owe them an even greater vote of thanks for their vigilance and forbearance. The report we have in front of us gives us some idea of the scale of the community emergency response, and I thank Richard Parry and Carol Gilchrist for putting it together. There'll be a lot of raw data out there right now, and it takes time and skill to get to the back of it. There are a couple of items that I'd add to from personal experience. The decline in requests for support is to be expected, as some people made arrangements or were able to start shopping for themselves again. Some of the drop-off in requests was also due to the volunteers doing things like regular shopping services and prescription pickups on an informal basis after those initial requests were made. The informal volunteering, or neighbourliness, is really hard to pin down, and the truly positive impact made by volunteers may never be known accurately. It does represent a form of capital that the council has drawn down, and that's worth reflecting on whilst we talk about harnessing community capacity. It's always tempted to try and measure these things in cash equivalents, but maybe our motivation should be we promote it because it's the right thing to do. An illustration in the Spen Valley is one resident was able to have a discussion with a shopping volunteer which led to the discovery of a serious undiagnosed medical condition in their spouse that they'd both been coping with for some time, and that they'd reached the point at which the carer was near collapse. There has now been a diagnosis, respite care, and a proper care plan put in place. And I'm pretty sure that similar scenes have played out across the borough, with who knows how many individual disasters averted. There's also mentioned the amount of food banks throughout the borough. Roughly 60 in all is estimated. This might seem like a lot, but some came about through specific need. The one in Cleckheaton that we set up with the Churches Together group came about because the one just over the border in Bradford had to close because the people running it had to self-isolate. And we could see that the need was going up, not down. Whether the motivation was specific or general, the people who set up the food banks all had one thing in common. They knew that this wouldn't be over quickly. And the pandemic is still far from over. We have had the first wave, and the lockdown has brought down the rates of infection, but there is no vaccine and the virus is still with us and still dangerous. Outbreaks like Cleckheaton and Batley were dealt with well, but we need to do the fast learning that helps us get appropriate information to communities to help us fight the virus and, as importantly, to help us fight rumour. As more lockdowns like Leicester become likely, both will be increasingly important. The pandemic brought a near stop to the country's economy, and there is a sense that we have yet to feel the full effects. I heard something recently that went, there are a lot of people unemployed right now, they just don't know it. Government is trying to get in front with measures for unemployment for the young, which is the right thing to do, but will it be enough? There is a possible swathe of middle-aged professionals that may also find themselves unemployed with little prospect of employment until retirement. The community responses from members across the borough has attempted to encompass some of this ongoing need with the food banks, but also with the services like debt counselling and benefits advice. As I said earlier, there's a lot of new data being gathered, and at a rate that's difficult to examine properly. We do need to set aside time for that data, though. The numbers show that the pandemic is not a leveller, but that there is a mosaic of inequalities among BAME communities, the elderly, and the less well-off. The word that my eye keeps resting on is resilience, and I think that's the thing. I think that's the thing that we could pursue and yet still have an eye on the reactive side of our responses. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bill Armour.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first thing to say, sir, is that COVID-19 has been traumatic for a large number of people, and none more so than the families and friends of those who have sadly died as a result of the virus. My thoughts, and I'm sure those of this chamber, are with them. Whilst at the present moment the virus seems to be to some degree in abeyance, I think it's far too early for us to relax our vigilance. There could be a resurgence either locally or nationally, and we must remain prepared for any eventuality. Although I do not believe that we should see this debate as an opportunity to wallow in self-congratulation, I will briefly mention this Council's response to the COVID-19 situation. Officers, employees and members have, as a body, reacted quickly and effectively to a wholly novel and alarming event. As hindsight comes into sharper focus, I have little doubt the mistakes will be identified. These should be seen as positives, as valuable lessons to be learnt from. They should not come to be seen as negatives to be used as weapons to attack the Council. This Council has acted at all times in the perceived best interests of all of our people. Of that I am certain, and I am happy to place those sentiments on record, Mr. Mayor. I wish now to concentrate on the way in which the community, throughout the nation, within the borough, and in my case within my ward of Kirkburton, has reacted to COVID-19. For many years, people within academia, myself included, have fretted about a perceived atomisation of society, leading to the supposed breakdown of community. The underlying mantra has been that people care only for themselves and those close to them, not for their fellow citizens, and that doom and gloom must follow as society disintegrates. Well, there have been well-publicised alleged breaches of lockdown regulations, some by individuals, others by large groups of people. But the great mass of the population have acted well. They've acted very well, sir. They've accepted severe restrictions on their wealth and liberty for the greater good, and they've shown a remarkable degree of responsibility and care for their fellows. The nation and this borough is so much the stronger for that. The doubters, those who feared the fragmentation of society, and I include myself amongst those, have been proved wrong. There remains much cause for optimism about the health of society, and with it, community. In my own ward of Kirkburton, and I'm sure many, if not all, colleagues across this chamber, or across the ether as it is tonight, could say much the same of their wards. But I have seen close up the way residents have come together. There was a spontaneous upswelling of desire to help others, to ensure that no one was left isolated. Existing community groups rose to the challenge, and new ones emerged. Shopping was done, prescriptions were collected, and contact was made with isolated people, whether over the garden fence or through the telephone. This was consistent throughout all of the villages in my ward, and I pay homage to all of those who volunteered to help others. I find the spirit both humbling and inspiring. It's important to note, Mr. Mayor, that there will always be cracks in any support system, and that there will always be individuals who fall through these cracks. It seems to me that an important lesson here is that we must identify these cracks and act to seal them, and that we must continue to identify groups and individuals who are especially liable to miss out on provisions. This could be for personal circumstances, could be community circumstances.
30 minutes.
Thank you.
30 seconds,
30
sorry.
minutes. Oh, come on.
30 seconds, sorry.
Cheat. Work of this nature has been done for many years now by Kirklees, but we must not lose sight of the fact that this work will never be fully complete. We must continue with it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mark Thompson, guest speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to start by just probably using a couple of words, one being humble and the other being proud. Going around the ward as we've done on a regular basis, humble to see often you'd like to help, but things are already taken care of with volunteers, individuals. For instance, Birkenshaw coronavirus volunteers, within 3 days of mention of the coronavirus, 16 people had already volunteered to shop, pick up prescriptions, make phone calls to family, etc. for the local Birkenshaw population. The next would be the food bank at Howden Clough that continued all the way through the lockdown, apart from 1 week right at the beginning where all shops had closed and they had no food to distribute. And the third is the Cobbles team, a cafe in Birstall that closed down day one and reopened within the week to distribute food, to give out food parcels. And the other side of the teams were, what I noticed were the Safer Kirklees team that were proactive all the way through and trying to deal with other issues as far not just food and prescriptions, but also antisocial behaviour that carried on throughout, looking after the elderly in some of the flats on the estates, etc. They continue to work their best the way through it. I'm proud that local businesses, all that have struggled, but some have stepped up to the mark on a regular basis and gone above and beyond what was expected of any individual or small business to make sure that people got food delivered. Local butchers, going back to the old days of delivering door to door in vans and on foot. And it's been a humbling experience over the last 4 months to see the locals provide services that we thought we were doing well, but you realise really how far you could go if everybody was brought together in situations like this. Thank you, Mayor. That's all.
Councillor Bellamy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I unmute to speak rather than rise. So for me, this isn't about what councillors have done or what actions the council through the pandemic have taken. It's about what community groups and individuals have done and how they've come together, how they've worked together, how they have reacted to this deadly disease that has had an impact on all our lives. In Colne Valley, there's been so many groups, businesses, and just people that have stood up to help others, from delivering food to collecting medicines, taking pets for walks, and even making phone calls just to check people are okay. Most have done this from their own pocket and not as a sense of duty. Colne Valley has shown again it's a community that cares. From Pride in Linthwaite, who have given support to the whole of Linthwaite, Slathwaite Fire Service, who worked with the Home Valley Food Bank to make sure everyone had access to essentials, Marsden Help, who worked with the newly established Village Green Community Grocers to make sure that those in the very outlying areas were cared for. The individuals who even went out to pick litter up after the moors and the Sparth Reservoir were visited by hundreds of people during the lockdown heatwave. These are the people that deserve the praise and recognition from councillors and this council. I'm grateful to live in the Colne Valley, surrounded by so many amazing people and groups. I'm proud to be able to support them and when they need it. I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else in these unprecedented times. So just to wrap up, my community experience and challenges within COVID-19 are what an amazing group of people live in the area in the Colne Valley. And I hope that these people will continue to be amazing and be liked, and we can carry on giving them the support that they need. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Like many others have already spoken, firstly, I'd really like to thank our council officers for their hard work, their resilience, and certainly the flexibility they've shown through this crisis. It's truly been quite amazing. So thanks, Jackie, to you and your team. I'd like to speak a little bit about Home Valley South and our experience. Our community responded very quickly and very effectively to the crisis. A number of groups very quickly emerged: the Mutual Aid Group, Home Valley South Hardship Fund, the Community Anchor really took off, food banks enhanced their services, and the Parish Council provided financial support. The Mutual Aid Group was the first really new group to come off to start. And very quickly, within a few weeks, it had established some 450 volunteers. And up until a few weeks ago, had responded to almost 400 calls. Many of those were delivering food, prescriptions, and quite a number signposting people with more complex needs to appropriate agencies. We also established a hardship fund. I helped fund that through my own budget, but really the main person who funded that was Jimmy Dickinson from Longleys Farm, a great example of a local employer who really cares about his community, and even before this crisis has really committed not just finance but time and energy into helping people within the community. This hardship fund has provided cash grants to people within our ward who really fall between the cracks and we're really struggling. And it's been very humbling to read some of the comments that come back to us about, you know, people telling us they were in tears when they received the money, well, can't wait for the day when they can actually put some money back into the fund themselves. Also, the Community Anchor, which is supported by Home First Tech Limited, has really come into its own. That's really grown throughout this crisis. It's provided a vital link between the council and the mutual aid groups, and has also operated the hardship fund and ensured that in the hardship fund in particular, that all decisions have been made by an independent panel. So myself and Jimmy certainly weren't involved in that. The food banks have really worked overtime like everywhere else. And in particular, the Full Life Church in Thongsbridge, I know has been providing services, not just in our valley, but over across in the other valleys as well. And the Parish Council has certainly helped by providing them with significant financial support. I think this bottom-up community organising approach has really been core to us implementing a timely and effective and inclusive support for our community in Home Valley South. We must build on this. Must ensure that we develop a recovery plan which reflects this and helps us reduce inequalities across Kirklees. And I'm delighted to see that this administration, supported by the Chief Exec and her team, are determined to implement such an approach. You certainly have my support in doing this, and I'm very sure that you'll have the support of my community as well. Thank you.
Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As in other wards in Kirklees, we continue to see an extraordinary voluntary effort underway in Lindley. We're supporting people facing hardship in the COVID-19 crisis, and we want to express our deepest appreciation to everyone involved in this great effort. At the very beginning of the crisis, I and ward colleagues, Councillor Eastwood and Councillor Smith, wrote to all elderly residents in the Lindley ward, providing them with relevant information and guidance from government as it came in, and also from the council, as well as offering our support to help and assist, which we have done, from picking up prescriptions, doing shopping for vulnerable residents. In Lindley, we've supported local groups, organisations and schools, particularly focusing on families and vulnerable children, with the help of our schools meeting the needs during the Easter break, half term and out of school. This crisis is without precedent in living memory. Nobody could have predicted its severity, and this government was clearly not well prepared for it. Our public services are doing an amazing job. We are proud to have Huddersfield Royal Infirmary in the Lindley ward and see the amazing work carried out on a daily basis. We have the utmost admiration for the bravery of our frontline NHS, social care, emergency services, teachers and other key workers who have risked their own health for others. People have come together with the Council to deliver vitally needed help for the most vulnerable. Without this, many would have gone without food or other essential supplies. The Council helpline number was invaluable and a helpful tool for us to support residents. We've received so much help and support from Council officers, staff, K&H workers who have gone above and beyond to support and help. That being said, this administration has lacked leadership at vital times. Some communication and clarification around schools and the reopening process has been poor, along with details on the recent outbreaks. Instead of owning the narrative of the story, it was shrouded in secrecy and mystery, which caused a lot of unnecessary fear amongst residents. The community response itself in Lindley has been remarkable, ranging across individual volunteers, spontaneous mutual aid groups that were set up, Lindley businesses, the faith groups, in particular the Eden Centre, and our schools, Lindley Infant School, Lindley Juniors, Rainwood Juniors and Infants, Moorlands and Sallandine Nook. It reflects great credit on everyone who is taking part. We need to remain vigilant, looking out for people who haven't been identified so far, who may need help. When the pandemic passes, we hope that our society recognises more tangibly the work of all those who perform important caring and other public service roles in holding our communities together. Again, we're grateful to all the volunteers, staff during this time. I want to say a huge thank you to colleagues at every level for the work they're doing collectively to manage this period on behalf of our communities and working tirelessly to help those affected by COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to echo the thanks to everybody who was involved in supporting anybody else, no matter who they were and where they were. From a personal point of view, St Andrew's Church in Liversedge, their community did some amazing work. They reached out to 4 wards, supplying food parcels. Those who could pay, paid, and those who couldn't, they got it for free. And basically to everybody, I saw some amazing things. People going out shopping, they were running errands. And I think the thing that stood out the most for me was that people genuinely cared for people they'd never met before. People who, in any other circumstance, they wouldn't have met them. And yet they were willing to go out and do whatever they needed for nothing back. And I think that's the thing that stood out to me the most. People who were already scared for themselves and they were willing to go that extra mile and even put themselves at risk for others. And I think that's the part that we celebrate in Kirklees. What amazing communities we have. People did that. There was nothing back for them. It was purely selfless. And I saw that time and time again. I think the thing that amazed me the most as well was the fact that my challenge wasn't money for once. We weren't struggling for funding. We were struggling, one, to do what we wanted to do because it was such a difficult time. What people needed was food. It was difficult to get in the early days. And the other thing was the fact that we were struggling to find the people who needed the help because so many people were so stoic and I'll cope, I'll get on, I'll do it. And we had to really work hard to find some of those people who needed our help. And that was a big challenge. I think going forward, we are going to need some money. There are groups who are going to need a lot of support to carry on the work and do it differently because it is going to need to be done differently. The needs have changed, the challenges are changing. And at some point, you know, people are going to come out of isolation. The world is going to start turning again. So what I'm really speaking about is the fact that we had that 30,000 ward fund. We didn't spend an awful lot of hours. We had some very generous donations, particularly from Morrison's in Hetmond Wyke, who were unbelievable, making huge food donations every week. And also we had Tesco in Cleckheaton who were helping us make up the food parcels. That's obviously going to change now. And I think what people need isn't going to be food. I think it's going to be something very different. So I'm asking really, asking, I suppose, Councillor Pandora and Jackie to consider what we do financially going forward now when we start putting our new plan together, because it will be a new plan. It'll be something completely different to what we've done the last 16 weeks. So I would ask if we can now start talking about the next steps and how we find out what people need is the big challenge now. So I would suggest that where we had the support network where people could ring in and say, I need food, I need help with this, that and the other, that carries on in some way, maybe differently, but I think it needs to carry on in some way so people have a route directly into the council, directly into the anchor organisations, and we don't just shut, don't for a minute expect we'd shut all the doors, but I think we need to keep everything open at the moment, and it needs to just change to adapt to the changing needs of our communities. Okay, thank you.
We're going to go for a 10 minutes break now. So if everybody's back at 6:40, and if you leave your systems on and just have a comfort break, and we'll come back to you guys. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We've got 7 speakers, list of 7 speakers. We could do with a few more if anybody wants to speak. They need to indicate very soon because then we'll be closing the list. So the next person is Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Lovely. Okay. So good evening, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to everybody who's spoken today. I think it's great to hear so many fantastic stories about what's happening in your area and all the success stories. So at least, you know, we're able to share what's going on in other areas. I'd like to begin by congratulating Kirklees Council, Jackie Gedman and her team for the rapid way in which the council have responded to the coronavirus pandemic in this town. During the early stages in March, at the beginning of the lockdown, in Kirklees, like so many other parts of the UK, people have been very anxious and scared. Very little was known about the virus and how it would affect residents physically, psychologically, and economically. And of course, those most affected, especially the vulnerable, namely the homeless, the elderly, those on limited incomes, and those self-isolating, have been affected. In rising to the challenge, Kirklees Council has quickly developed a rapid team to ensure those most in need had the adequate food, medicines, supports and provisions. The street homeless were immediately given refuge. Food banks created almost overnight around the borough, as we've heard from some of our colleagues. Also coordinated in what seemed like a very seamless way. And locally, we have seen community kindness and charity on a massive scale, with people, even vulnerable residents themselves, wanting to help those less fortunate. However, an overwhelming fear was created when the government announced that people from the Black and Asian ethnic minority groups were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And it has become evident that people from these backgrounds were dying at an alarming rate. Not just the elderly and those with underlying health conditions, as previously believed. To ensure that the elderly and the vulnerable from the Black community were safeguarded, Oasis Care Support Services developed a food delivery service. Oasis Care Support Service is a community-based organisation located on the border of Birkby and the Fartown area. They normally provide domestic and befriending services to the elderly throughout Kirklees. However, during the period of the lockdown, they took the decision to provide a unique type of service to a community at high risk of contracting the disease. A locally sourced catering business was used to prepare the meals, helping the resilience of that business to stay in business. There were also other support that was received, for example, from the local ASDA in the Ashbrow ward, who donated a large quantity of food. Support to Recovery, S2R, donated recreational activities to improve mental health and well-being, which was also delivered with the food. And the volunteers were fantastic in taking the time out, not just to deliver the meals, but also to engage and speak to the residents themselves. I found the residents were more delighted to see a friendly face and converse, of course from a safe distance, than getting the food delivered itself. The only interaction many residents had was with us, so they were extremely grateful for the visit. So well done Oasis Care for providing this vital bespoke service at a time when the world feels like it's gone mad and the vulnerable need help the most. I'm still working closely with Oasis Care and other community groups to identify key issues and inequalities, and therefore I welcome the leaders' comments that's been made to address disparities in the Black community. I would like to end by thanking everyone in Kirklees for doing their bit to support each other. I think Kirklees is a shining example of what can be achieved when we all pull in the same direction. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to follow other councillors in reiterating my thanks to our colleagues. In response to COVID-19, the response has been immense locally, and that includes our refuse collectors, our social workers, through to our policy teams and our councillors. We have a great gratitude for all of you. My thoughts are also with families and friends who have lost loved ones at this time. I know it's been a very difficult time for all of them. I particularly want to thank all our frontline workers across Kirklees, including shop workers and many people who have gone out and worked at a time when we were all told to stay at home. Many times they put themselves at risk and put themselves in danger, and we must thank them all. Sadly, many of our frontline workers are also our lowest paid workers, and I hope we will think about that differently as we move forward to recover from this crisis. It is clear that COVID-19 has not been a great equaliser, but in fact has exacerbated inequalities. We must do far more nationally and locally to invest in social capital as we do in infrastructure capital, and we must think differently about how we value people. I want to commend the work of all our local partners and residents, and Amanda's mentioned some of the work that has already been going on in the Ashbrow Ward area. I want to speak a little bit about our community anchor, Local Services to You. They sprung into action very quickly, and we've been working very closely with them throughout the COVID process. They started working by supporting residents with shopping requests, befriending and food parcels, and they've been providing this service at a wider geographical area. They've also recently set up a baby bank. It's very sad that this has had to be put in place, but they were able to do it relatively quickly, and many requests have already been put in place. We've also had a number of local mutual aid groups who have worked closely with Local Services to You and ourselves. And we've provided funding to groups like the Fixby and Cowcliff Neighbourhood Group, who created a woodland trail as many people went out for their daily walks, and they've supported isolated neighbourhoods. Local church groups and the local Godwaras have also set up food banks and provided food parcels in the area. We've supported a local youth project to develop an online platform, and this has now been expanded borough-wide. And our local schools and nurseries have also stepped in. We recently visited North Huddersfield Trust School, who have been supporting us pupils on site through e-learning, and they've also carried out a number of home visits, as well as supporting our local community. The teachers that we spoke to had said this had been a very difficult time for many of them, but for them, they always had to put the pupils first. Like many councillors, we've also established a hardship ward fund, and this has supported families that are falling through the gaps. And this has included purchases of everyday items like a microwave or a tablet for a young person so they could access online learning. We're currently looking at our longer term response, and we are concerned about unemployment levels as schemes like the furlough scheme come to an end, and in particular the support for young people who are falling behind or who are left behind. We need to ensure that we have the right policies in place locally and nationally to meet this need. I know some announcements have already been made by the Chancellor today, but our focus must be on people, and we must make this a priority. We must also make sure our community groups are supported longer term. They've really stepped in throughout this process, and we need to think about how we value them longer term. Our voluntary and community sector has done so much work, and we should be thinking a little bit more about how we commission and fund services. We must also think about our community assets and community buildings and the part they will play in our recovery plan. We must remember inequalities are not inevitable, and going forward we should think about how we tackle these inequalities. I do believe this council are following the right agenda, and I know that many councillors will be doing the best they can to ensure we do that work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Kaushik, you've already spoken, so I think you might have pressed your button by mistake. So, Councillor Fark, and also we've closed the list now, so there's no more adding on to the list. Thank you. Councillor Afaq Butt. Councillor Butt.
Do you have an IT issues?
Right, I'll go to the next one on the list, Councillor Davis, P. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh.
Ms. Paula Davis.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to apologise and say it wasn't me. Okay.
It's not the first time we've had this confusion between us. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Of course, I'll add my thanks to all the groups and individuals who have helped at any stage in any way through this time. Key workers, health workers, care home workers, individuals, volunteers. We've had so many people already have quoted so many different groups, and I'm not going to add individuals to the list. It has been such a difficult time, and nobody has been left unaffected. And I'm sure my story isn't unique in this, but I think the power of these stories in the fact there've been so many of them, and hearing them again and again just shows the impact of them. In Almondbury Ward, we were quick to establish a mutual aid group, Almondbury Solidarity Against Coronavirus. We quickly got a telephone line set up, leaflets were left at key points, such as shops and doctors' surgeries. Posters were put up in the streets, and the group raised a huge number of volunteers and matched them up with people who needed help. They were also aware that they needed to advertise that the service was there and was a safe, formal environment where people who needed help could go to and not be at risk of being scammed or ripped off or all those horrible things. We collected prescriptions for people, we befriended people, we took shopping, we even fixed a fridge and got somebody a bed. The heartening thing was how quickly people pulled together to do this. Almondbury Solidarity Against Coronavirus is now going to go on to a longer term future. It's getting constituted, and so it can provide ongoing help and support. An emergencies fund was also used, and in Almondbury we used some of those funds to support a local restaurant and a shop. The restaurant was using up food that it had because it couldn't trade, and started off by making free meals available through a local news agency. When it saw the need that was there, it approached us and said if we could supply fund ingredients, and then this went on for weeks where they were providing free meals for the needy. My colleague Alison Munro has also been key working with mutual aid groups in Lepton and forging bonds with the churches in the area. Going forward, we're building on the hot meal service by setting up a hot meal service to provide ongoing support to families who will still need additional meals, particularly through the summer holidays. It's been fabulous to see how a community can pull together and look to help others. And I know the new bonds made, whether they're on a personal level from a one-to-one from befriending, or on a much more large scale through the mutual aid groups, those bonds will continue to be built on and will go further. Sorry. Also through this time, we've also seen how quickly new ways of working have developed, much more flexible, much more collaborative. Zooms, team meetings have quickly become a way of life. I mean, look at us tonight. I'm not saying they're a replacement for face-to-face meetings. It'd be nice to get back to some safe, socially distant interaction. But if we can cut unnecessary travel and still work together much more flexibly, we ought to be doing that. In Almondbury Ward, we've had ward meetings with ward organisations successfully. And in fact, the mutual aid group has existed almost exclusively in a digital format. Sadly, there's also been evidence of a Me Too, I'm all right, Jack attitude developing in some areas. Littering and fly tipping were especially prevalent at the beginning of the crisis. Nuisance trails, bikes, gatherings in public spaces, and on more and more littering. We've all seen it. I don't want to rake over it too much. But
30 seconds.
All of this has made me even more determined to build on the good that has come out and what we've seen, and to work harder with my ward colleagues, with local community groups and third sector groups to build on all of this hard work and the good done so far. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fark Butt. Councillor Butt. Can you unmute your system? Councillor Warner.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wow, isn't it inspiring, everybody, to hear all these positives at such an awful time to be living in? For none of us can remember, well, my generation, I mean, 60s, wasn't at war, but it's felt incredibly challenging. And what has been totally inspiring is listening to all of you. So a well-known leader who once said that there was no such thing as community, this is totally disproved. I mean, there's nothing more important than community and people. And I've been lucky enough in the Colne Valley in Slough to be involved in helping to set up, we have numerous groups, but we didn't actually have a specific community group. And we set up Slough Mutual Aid, involving some council officers who are resident, and myself and Rob, and also other local people. And we were lucky enough, as Donna mentioned earlier, to have the fire station there. So we've worked very closely with the fire station. They've been fantastic, taking food parcels out and firing. We have done, we've also been involved in supporting medical support, because many of you will know that the early problem with getting testing resulted in a lot of counsellors, a lot of carers having to stay locked in for 6 weeks. So we did things like go up and make breakfast, social distance breakfast, bacon sandwiches. And we've also got a creative team who come up with fun things. So apart from the obvious, where we set up a food bank in the fire station and also supported the one in Marston and Linthwaite, we've been doing a whole range of other things, which have been fun. We have someone who grows local flowers. We've been nominating people each week to receive fantastic flowers, which is donated. We've set book boxes around the place. We've been cooking meals, which Meals on Wheels have been taking out to people. We have Fish and Chip Friday. There have been so many different things going on, as well as dog walking and collecting prescriptions. But the thing that I just want to acknowledge is the fantastic support at every time we've had from the councillors, from the officers, and the community has just come together like we've never seen it. And I think, you know, the caution is that we hope we're not leaving this too quickly. Mutual Aid Group has met once a week on Zoom, and we intend to keep going because we think resilience is going to be key, as is what's going to happen to many of our young people. I have a personal mental health, and it concerns me that we do have a lot of work to do in the future, but it's been a privilege to work with the group in Slough, so thank you.
Councillor Fark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As many colleagues in the chamber will be aware, my family endured one of the hardest times we've ever had to face when both my parents were hospitalised with COVID-19, and a realisation that when the Prime Minister said at the start of the pandemic that many of us would lose loved ones, that could become a reality. Time. No one can truly understand how it feels when you speak to a doctor for them to tell you.
Reception. Can you turn your video off and then we can hear you maybe? Councillor Butt? I think that, yeah, next one, yeah. Who was next? Councillor Rob Walker.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My own Combe Valley ward, I think, has been very well covered already by my colleagues, Leslie and Donna. So I'm really going to talk about my more general experiences. At the start of the crisis, I was given the opportunity to work with Councillor Scott, who introduced this discussion, working in the south of Kirklees, supporting the community response. The speed and scale of the initial response from the community sector was fantastic.
They cannot offer any word.
Many existing community groups showed tremendous flexibility in taking on new responsibilities, operating as anchor organisations or mutual aid groups. A whole new structure was created within a couple of weeks. Right. Sorry, Mayor, I seem to be getting somebody else talking at the same time. Right, okay, I'll carry on. One thing I do think we need to look out for is the fact that some community groups had to shut down, partly if it was a case of the age and medical conditions of those involved, and sometimes just because of COVID circumstances. There is an awareness that as we move forward, we need to make sure that these groups are able to recover and play their vital role within communities. As people have already described, we've got a whole range of new mutual aid groups springing up, many of them initially based around Facebook appeals for volunteers. These were often amongst the first groups to respond with practical help and have done an absolutely fantastic job. I would like to pay tribute to the role played by third sector leaders, and in particular Bridget Hughes, for the role that they've played in fostering the links between the third sector and the council and supporting individual groups. I'd also like to just reiterate the point about many of our local businesses, particularly in the very threatened food and hospitality sector, where many of them have responded to opportunities, even at a time when they were under threat, and often set up partnerships with community groups to supply food to people in need. The council itself, I think, has responded really well to the crisis. Councillors have been at the heart of the community response. Their knowledge of local communities and their ability to work with new and old groups has been critical to the success of our response. Officers from different services have been brought together to create the 4 hubs that have taken on the challenge of working with communities across Kirklees. They've proven to be a tremendous success, showing that place-based working and partnerships provide the best service for our citizens. Every service within the council has had to respond to COVID. Essential services have been maintained with reduced resources, and individuals have shown great flexibility and commitment to our community in taking on these new roles. So, for example, a lot of people from the Green Spaces team have worked in the provision of PPE to the care sector. Times have been very tough. I think Afak's description of what's happened within his family is typical, unfortunately, of what has happened to a number of families within Kirklees. However, we have achieved a great deal and we've learned a lot. I would like to reassure Councillor Hall, who spoke earlier about the need to learn from this crisis. And I'd like to reassure him that there is already underway a major project to try and ensure that we do capture people's experiences and their ideas about what we should be doing going forward to make sure that the widest possible group of people are involved in the process of recovery. The challenge now is, I think,
30 seconds.
Reflect on our experiences, to build our capacity to face whatever the future may hold as we strive to build back better. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Donald Firth, can you unmute your system and then you can speak? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, well, first of all, can I say thanks to all our officers and the leadership of the council, the response was absolutely superb. I was asked in the first early days if I would help out at the New Life Church at Bridge. So I went down there to see the minister or the pastor there, Mr. Ian Gooch, and I was immediately taken on as a volunteer and given a delivery. Now, in the first fortnight, I probably had 3 or 4 deliveries a week. And now I've got up to 5. I cover Mondays right through to Friday. I've covered most of the areas, and it's a case of people have got so used to me now, they're actually waiting for me to come whatever morning it happens to be. It started, I had to use my sat-nav initially because there were areas of the Colne Valley I didn't really know too well. Now I've been so many times, I know my way around, and quite honestly, the response from the people and the people that come down to the church is just amazing. We also have a great response from the local shops. There's a local shop in Honley. Every Friday, there's fresh fruit, vegetables arrive, and then they're all deposited then on the Saturday morning. It's just, I can't believe it. The response we get. An officer response has been amazing. Our officers down there, you only have to ring, ask a question, and it was sorted out immediately. They couldn't be more helpful than they have been. They've been absolutely superb. In fact, the whole setup, considering that we didn't really know how this was going to pan out. I mean, nobody really knew this pandemic virus as to how it was going. Nobody'd seen one before. Nobody knew how to operate. We didn't know how we were going to go on. But I just turned out every morning with my gloves and my mask on, going around frightening old ladies and children, but you have to do these things, you know. But I've enjoyed every minute of it. And again, I shall be out again tomorrow. I think my trip out tomorrow is Paddocken district. So I've covered most of the South Kirklees areas, including Home Valley South, Home Valley North, Paddock, Taunton Lodge, all these places. Quite amazing how far we get with the New Life Church. Although Mr. Gooch, the Reverend Gooch, has been supplying food to the people, you know, it hasn't been able to afford to eat very well for 15 years, believe it or not. He's never had as many to deliver as we have just at present, but we've had a terrific response from all the supermarkets and, of course, local shops. In other words, people have been so kind, it's quite remarkable. What I would like to say, and I've heard this a few times tonight, I hope after this pandemic virus is gone, that we can carry on doing this, because it does make it more helpful. Everybody socialising together, it's great. And, you know, it's something that only happened once before, and I think that was in World War II. I wasn't about at the time, but people tell me that was the only time people pulled together then, and they are doing now, and let's hope it'll carry on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Donald Firth. Councillor Smage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As has been said, the community response has been absolutely fantastic. We have seen demonstrated our very real need for community and volunteering. But I also want to speak for a minute on something Councillor Walker mentioned as well, on volunteers and community groups that might not have been able to operate and have had to pause for a while. These are the ones that are going to need a lot of help to come back when they are able. Some will be part of larger organisations that will provide the help and guidance to be able to let them think about how to restart safely when they can do so or are ready to do so. Others will not have this, and we do need to give thought to how we can help going forward with guidance, advice and support. The report discusses health inequalities, social isolation and loneliness. As we've seen over the past few months, volunteers and groups play a vital role in helping people of all ages, including helping people from feeling isolated. I think far more of us can appreciate how easy it is to feel lonely when going from a busy life where you're hardly home to having to be at home all the time. And for people on their own, this could have been even more acute. Tackling loneliness is an easy thing to say, but it is vital to many people. For many years, we've recognised the role of community groups and our libraries in helping people. And the Which Way Next report on local area coordination that Kirklees have been a part of talks about giving people the space to be themselves to make their contribution to the community. We have seen this happen in all our wards as people have stepped up to help others and have made an invaluable contribution. We need to build on this as we move forward, continue to help people with loneliness, as well as ensuring that our vital work of tackling health inequalities is at the centre of our way forward. I think we should thank everyone who have and continue to work so hard to care and support for people in all our communities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to echo what everybody else has said, but I'd like to say thank you to the council officers and especially Jackie Gedman and her team in terms of how quickly they responded to the pandemic. We were, again, like everybody else has just said, we hit the ground straight away from the moment it happened. And funny enough, like others have mentioned, we were lucky enough that Moonlight Trust, a mutual aid group, was already around, set up, and was doing a lot of excellent work throughout Kirklees and also internationally as well in other countries, helping refugees, asylum seekers, and having links with the food banks and stuff like that. So for us, it was making sure the most vulnerable got the basic essentials delivered to them and having a route that those essentials were distributed to them. I think the other thing that we were very fortunate with was that because Moonlight Trust had 100+ volunteers on their books, we were able to utilize on them, and having them registered with DBS checks and everything else really did help myself and my ward colleague, Councillor Gulfan Massif, in doing that. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do that without the support of our engagement officer, Jackie Gedman, Jackie Ingham, I beg your pardon, in terms of the support and the role she gave us as well in terms of working with the different groups as well. I mean, I'd like to thank some of those groups that we work with. I mean, 2020 Foundation is one. There's obviously Chickley Community Centre. We made a number of referrals, Daraloom, Zachariah Mosque, Neighbourhood Nest, Dewsbury COVID-19 Action Group, Dewsbury Welfare Trust. So those were some of the voluntary groups that were out there that were helping us. But you've also got to understand that Ramadan kicked in for us as well. And as time went by, Ramadan started. I was fasting for 12 hours and plus, like Donald said, you know, I was going out to these families' homes, distributing food parcels, toiletries, and basic essentials. And as that was going on, we picked up that families were struggling with hot meals as well. And we were lucky enough that there are groups and organizations in our ward that was doing some work such as that already. And we were lucky enough that Neighbourhood Nest that was doing a lot of work in the schools. I think the schools have played a really pivotal role in what we were doing. We were very fortunate that with Savile Town, Pentland, Thornhill Lees, Thornhill Academy, and even Thelma Walker's Overthorpe Academy School joined with us, and in terms of supporting all those vulnerable communities in doing that. Meal-wise, so far through Ramadan to this date, we've delivered over 15 to 2,000 hot meals. We've delivered 1,500 food parcels, and we've helped over nearly of 2,000 families in support of what we have done. I think I'd just like to echo what other colleagues have said it's the communities coming together, in these really, really difficult times. I've really worked with us, supported us, and made sure that we were able to go out there and do what we could do. I mean, it has been difficult and it has been challenging, and as members will know that I'm also a carer for my dad. So obviously I was very mindful having making sure that I've got the mask and everything else on, but dropping the parcel and running away. I can see the mayor's clock ticking away, so I really want to quickly finish off. And I do think that it's moving forward in terms of looking at what more we can do and how we can move things forward, because people obviously on furlough, and I've heard people talking about hardship fund and other stuff. And I'd just like to say, I did want to read a quick letter, Mr. Mayor, if I can, quickly, from one of the schools, if you don't mind, please, if I can. It's from the school and the kids from a school in my ward, and it says, "What can we say? The support you have given us through lockdown has been amazing. The delicious hot meals you have provided each week have been so greatly received by us. The time and effort involved by you and your team, and the ingredients and preparing the meals, delivering them to us has been really appreciated. Beyond words, your food parcels have helped our families during this unusual and challenging time. Once again, thank you very much." And that was from schools and the families of those schools. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sheikullah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and keep this very, very brief. But firstly, I'd like to echo all my thanks to the council staff and the leadership, and in particular all the groups in Greenhead who did some amazing work, really organised themselves very, very quickly within days of the pandemic. And there's some fantastic work going on in Paddock with Paddock Community Trust. Jubilee Centre have got a really good programme, and a lot of volunteers, and they're creating a lot of interest. Huddersfield Community First, Dash and Delicious Desserts. Along with Mohan and Carol, I think, like all other wards, we've been in meetings a lot, trying to find out the best way to move forward. But for us now, our focus has been on the recovery and what it's going to look like going forward. So there's conversations going on there, and I'd like to thank personally our ward support officer for Greenhead, who takes the time out every single Friday to spend a couple of hours with us and give us updates on everything that's going on in the ward. So thank you. I'd like to also pick on very quickly on a point that Kathy made about place-based working. I think it's fair to say that there was a lot of uncertainty around place-based working when it was first announced about its purpose, what it was meant to do, what it was meant to achieve. And I think that we needed something to really test its capacity, its framework and its outcomes. Maybe not a global pandemic, but we certainly needed something practical in a working format to see how that would really play out. And I'm personally looking forward to working and shaping place-based working a lot more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. We're going to bring, for the last time, Councillor Butt again.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As many colleagues in the chamber will be aware, my family endured one of the hardest times we have ever had to face when both my parents were hospitalised with COVID-19, and a realisation that when the Prime Minister said at the start of the pandemic that many of us would lose loved ones could become a reality at any time. A time made even more difficult when we couldn't be together as a family, but had a strong reliance on phone calls and family WhatsApp groups to stay in contact. No one can truly understand how it feels when you speak to a doctor for them to tell you that because this is a new condition, they cannot offer any words of advice from previous experiences, but are working as hard as possible. It was only when my mom's condition deteriorated and was moved to intensive care for mechanical ventilation that the stark reality dawned upon us, that this wasn't something to ignore. It wasn't flu. It was something more sinister, something that attacked one of the vital bodily functions, the respiratory function, which eventually stops working because of pneumonia. Thankfully, we had something to hold on to, the fact that my parents had no long-term health conditions, which would eventually be a determining factor in whether they made it through or not. Luckily, both made it out of hospital and are now on the road to recovery. For that, we are eternally grateful to the wonderful staff at Pinderfields who made this happen. It cements again the commitment and dedication NHS staff have towards patient care. Mr. Mayor, Pearl Buck, the author, said, "The test of a civilization is in the way that it cares for its helpless members." And we have many heroes who on the front line have gone above and beyond in the face of danger to help people in many ways. And we are grateful, but we also have so many examples for the voluntary and charitable sectors that have helped families with basic necessities throughout this time. I would like to put on record my thanks to the Magic Wishing Well organisation, Purpose of Life Charity, Bramwell Associates, Moonlight Trust, More in Common, Batley Food Banks, mosques, churches, temples, and so many others that have stepped up and provided food packages and other essentials to those who have been adversely affected by lockdown and the wider impact of the pandemic. Finally, Mr. Mayor, we have our differences, be they political, religious, cultural, or socio-economic. But one thing that has really resonated throughout this difficult time is that we are ultimately one community. The work that our charities and volunteers have done, the work that we have done across this chamber from all parties, transcend all these differences and shows again that when a crisis hits that doesn't discriminate on colour, religion, or politics, our response doesn't either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bott. Councillor Viv Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to give way to Councillor Butt to try and fit him in, but you've managed to get him in. Can I just say, people have talked a lot about organisations that have done shopping, that have got medication and so on, and I like to thank all of those across North Kirklees because they've been brilliant. But I'd particularly like to talk about Street Bikes CIC, which have been providing bikes for free to NHS staff who wanted them, and the Rainbow Baby Bank, which provides baby and young children supplies across all of North Kirklees. They've done brilliantly. But I'm going to be really parochial now and not talk about Hetman Wipe My Wall, but talk about children's services, because I have to say our social workers have continued on keeping children safe in some of the most difficult circumstances. And we've had things like CAL staff moving across to work and help out in residential care homes, you know, which is brilliant. And there's continuing work has been done and continues to be done, and support to schools who've stayed open to provide education for workers who had to be at work and vulnerable children. So loads and loads of things, really innovative ideas across the service, some of which will continue on because they're well worth keeping and continuing. And that's a real lesson to learn. And I'll just finish by saying I'm getting a little bit anxious when I've heard people talk, because people I felt, and they may not have meant it, have talked as if COVID-19 is in the past. And I have to say it's not in the past. The numbers have dropped because people have taken precautions and kept themselves safe. I'm really worried that people are getting a message saying, oh, it's all okay now. And I have to say to those of you of a certain age like myself, and I can see a few faces in this chamber or on this screen, you really need to be taking care, as do those with any medical condition. So all I would ask is that people and the public don't suddenly think that everything is okay and we can just go and do everything as we did before, because it still isn't safe and people still need to take precautions. That's really put a downer on things, Mr. Mayor. I'll stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Muggeroyd.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, once again, to echo the appreciation and thanks to council staff, the community and voluntary organisations and ordinary people right across the community who kind of acted as individuals to help their neighbours and act as good neighbours. But what I wanted to focus on was, I think, a key feature of how our communities have reacted to this crisis is the organised character of a lot of the initiatives. And that, I think, showed the power of collective effort and cooperation. So, for example, in the Colne Valley, and I'm talking here about the whole Combe Valley, so Golka Ward, Abercombe Valley. We saw mutual aid groups established, and a really interesting feature of the response was that they all worked together really closely. So they had regular weekly meetings coordinated by the anchor organisation, which was Cooperative Care Combe Valley. And this resulted in loads of great initiatives that people from both wards were able to access. And I just wanted to highlight one initiative. So Huddersfield Town Supporters Association approached the anchor, and basically they'd got boxes of PPE equipment made by fans in Liverpool, which they delivered to the Combe Valley, and then this was delivered out to people and care homes and so on right across the valley. So it was communities across the UK working together. Now, I guess the key question we need to ask is, how can we grow and continue this good neighbourliness? And as everyone said, there's no single answer, but I just wanted to highlight a few key principles. I really agree with, firstly, I really agree with Councillor Uller and Councillor Scott. I would say what's happened around this crisis has vindicated place-based working and bottom-up approaches. And the second thing I wanted to flag up that I think we've learned here in the Combe Valley is that, you know, we tend to think of the wards as in terms of political boundaries, which of course they are, but actually that's not really how people in our communities see it. And in the Combe Valley, it was very much about people from Golka, Milnes Bridge, Cowlersley, Linthwaite, Slough, Marsden and so on, all working together. So I think there's a lesson there about how we organise in the future. We've got to cut with the grain of how people themselves perceive what their community is. And that brings me to the third issue, which is about structures, because I was particularly struck by the effectiveness of the democratic and collaborative approach taken by all the kind of mutual aid groups working with council officers and the anchor institution. And I would echo what Councillor Walker said. I think, you know, third sector leaders and Bridget Hughes played a really amazing role in coordinating that as well across the whole borough. So I think that's that collaborative approach is getting groups to work with each other. So they're not just helping individuals, but they're actually helping each other as organisations, which certainly occurred in the Combe Valley. And finally, I just wanted to pick up on a phrase that Councillor Davis used, because he used the phrase community organising to describe what has taken place. And I think that's really important. It's about harnessing energy of the community and matching it with an active, energetic community organising approach ourselves as councillors, as a council. And I think if we do that, then we can meet the future challenges. Yeah, thanks. We can meet the future challenges, because I think Councillor Kendrick's right. It's really important that we understand we're not out of the woods yet, and there's going to be massive health and economic and social problems are going to continue. So if we community organise, that's got to be a good way of tackling them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to pay tribute to those groups who've done so much and individuals, particularly to the Welcome Centre based in Huddersfield, our Anchor Trust, and Simon Ashby at the Paddock Community Trust. All those mutual aid groups that covered Golka, Cowlersley, Longwood and Milnes Bridge, and particularly Jane, who was involved in the COVID response in Golka. I think we've touched on some really interesting things this evening about work well. I think Councillor Smage touched on loneliness. And I think one of the things that my colleague Christine Iredale has done a really good job on is about contacting. She's been a befriender, she's been phoning people up. And people didn't always need a food parcel or a prescription picking up, but that telephone call, that contact was really appreciated. I think we touched on being good neighbours, and yeah, we've had all the community responses and that coordinated response. But what I've noticed walking around the village and helping out is actually how neighbours, start, more than ever talking to each other, offering to do shopping where that's necessary, picking up, and that is one of the things that we need to. That sense of being a good neighbour needs to continue, and I think the phrase we've used this evening is about community support. I think the point that Councillor Viv Kendrick made about it's not over, and I think John Lawson did that as well. Until we get a vaccine and effective treatment, there's still a risk, and what we need to do is mitigate that risk. It could be a long time into the future before it is as safe as it has been in the past. And we do need to keep doing things and reassuring and supporting communities to do what they need to do. And some of our vulnerable members of the community are going to have to be staying at home for a while to come or meeting in a socially distanced way. Just want to finish by looking at the future and those things. So yes, we do need to keep going with community support, building on that. Some of the environmental improvements we've seen, we're working virtually tonight. We've seen so many people in the council and employers working virtually, cutting out those car trips and those commuting trips. And if we can keep that going, I've noticed cleaner air around the villages that we represent, and we hope we can do that. And actually some of that virtual working has been really effective. Let's see if we can keep doing that as a council, but also supporting other employers to do that. Employment, the council's contacted thousands of businesses across the borough, and we know that there's been initiatives about supporting employment. That's there's again a possibility of things getting worse as lockdown is eased, and we need to use that intelligence about employment, our better understanding, as good an understanding of everything what employment is in the borough, to make sure we can support businesses. We can support employers and support appropriate employment training for young people in particular, but also, as I think has been mentioned earlier on, about people who might be losing their jobs for the first time, but they've still got a working life ahead of them. We need to support that. I just finally want to speak, and then Councillor Kendrick talks about young people services and education, schools and teachers and parents have done a fantastic job the last 3 months providing education. But that's something that we need to look to in the, that impact, those 3 months of schooling that children have lost. It's going to have a long-term impact, and we need to look at how we can make sure that children, as they go back to school when it's safe to do so, appropriate employment and training opportunities are, and we need to keep an eye on that and support each other to make sure that. But perhaps there's an opportunity to do things better than we have done in the past. Talk to our employers about the skills and training they need. So we've got apprenticeships that work for our young people and work for long employers. The fact that our young people haven't had to sit terminal examinations at 16 and 18 this year, perhaps there's a better way there and an opportunity to make our education less academic and more skills based. Lifelong learning could start, in a real sense, could start now. And that's my plea. Thank you. That's my plea for learning lessons. Thank you to neighbours. Thank you to community. But let's, particularly about how we move forward from this around the education of our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Will Simpson.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Councillor Butt for his contribution as well. That was very touching. I want to begin, as others have done, by thanking the leader, the chief executive, senior officers and the cabinet for their leadership and all the work that they've done in these really difficult times. I know you've all been working flat out and it tells. And I know we are biased as Kirklees councillors, but it is clear to me that we've been an exemplar to our neighbouring authorities in how we've responded to this crisis and supported our residents. Like colleagues across the chamber, like people said, I want to thank our Kirklees council staff who've been exceptional. Without question, they've gone above and beyond. Most of all, personally, I want to thank my amazing community in Denbydale, in particular, Paul Jones, the manager of our community anchor organisation, the Denbydale Centre, has been amazing and run himself into the ground for our community. He's been a hero and a champion for people that need support, so thank you for everything you've done, Paul. And we've had dozens and dozens of volunteers supporting people, as colleagues have in their wards as well. Ours under the banner of the HG8 Coronavirus Community Action Group. they have been absolutely amazing, so thank you all as well. Councillor Turner and I have done what we can to support them in volunteering and providing finances, as no doubt colleagues have done, but as we've said, no level of ward budget or ward councillors plodding around will ever achieve what has been achieved by everyone coming together as they have as a community. On one of my calls with Paul Jones, we were discussing the challenges that particular week and what we might be able to do to address them or try to address them. And that particular week, Paul said to me, well, one of the biggest issues is that the volunteers are getting restless. We've got so many people who want to get out and help someone, and we haven't got enough for them to do. You know, our communities are mobilised, and as a council, we've facilitated and worked in partnership with them on a scale like never before, to respond to a crisis we couldn't have foreseen and which demanded an emergency response. We've spent some time discussing place-based working and had disagreements in the chamber about the best way to go about it and whether we were doing it right. But as has been alluded to, we've had a crisis without preparation, something we couldn't have a long-term plan for. And we've done place-based working in an amazing way and helped thousands of people who are desperate need across Kirklees, which has been absolutely amazing. As has been alluded to in previous contributions, we need to make sure that we don't lose the good that's come out of this really difficult time. Whilst we want coronavirus to go, it is still here. But when it eventually does, we can't allow the community capacity that's mobilised to go with it. I know that we're working on building our plan for what we do next, and I hope and trust we ensure that that's a part of it. And finally, I just want to say that it's great to see all of you again, colleagues, wherever you sit on the spectrum of views across the council chamber, though I do hope we get back to having disagreements in the chamber again soon. It is great to hear about everything that's been going on in your areas as well. So thank you everyone for what you've been doing in your wards. This would be true whenever you asked me, but now more than ever, I'm proud of my community in Dundale, and I'm very proud to be a Kirklees councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Will. Thank you for your contribution to the debate this evening. To conclude the debate, can I invite Councillor Pando to move the all-party motion as agreed by the group leader and circulated earlier? Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just read the motion as written, Mr. Mayor. Number one, that the council places on record its sincere gratitude and appreciation in recognition of the efforts of the NHS and social care workers, together with all other key workers, both within the council, partner organisations, volunteers and other providing essential services to the communities that make up Kirklees throughout the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic and on an ongoing basis. Number two, that the leadership role elected councillors play in working with communities they represent to use their collective knowledge, insight and understanding into the impacts of COVID-19 on communities be acknowledged. Councillors must therefore play an ongoing central leadership role in working with those communities to both tackle the challenges that lie ahead and help them to recover. In light of this, Council resolves to establish themed engagement opportunities that provide all 69 councillors with the opportunity to contribute to the process of generating ideas and proposals to assist recovery. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded.
Seconded, Mr. Mayor. I think at this point, everything has been said in the previous debate that needs to be said on this issue. So I'm very happy to second the motion now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We will now move to the vote.
Thanks, members. You're voting on the all-party motion. If you could please indicate for, against or abstain. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Akhtar.
Yep.
Councillor Allison.
Yes.
Councillor Armour.
Yes, 4.
Councillor Asif.
4.
Councillor Bellamy.
4.
Councillor Bolt. Councillor Burke.
4.
Councillor Butt.
4.
Councillor Cooper.
4.
Councillor Paula Davis.
4.
Councillor Paul Davis.
4.
Councillor Eastwood.
4.
Councillor Donald Firth.
4.
Councillor Eric Firth.
4.
Councillor Goodwin.
4.
Councillor Granger Mead.
4.
Councillor Greaves.
4.
Councillor David Hall.
4.
Councillor Steve Hall.
4.
Councillor Holmes.
4.
Councillor Hill.
4.
Councillor Homewood.
4.
Councillor Sane, the Mayor.
4.
Councillor Iredale. Councillor Korshik.
4.
Councillor Kendrick.
4.
Councillor Khan.
4.
Councillor Lawson.
4.
Councillor Lees Hamilton.
4.
Councillor Lee Richards.
4.
Councillor Lunat. Councillor Lowe.
4.
Councillor Lyons.
4.
Councillor Marchington.
4.
Councillor Mather.
4.
Councillor McBride. Councillor McGuinn.
4.
Councillor Monroe.
4.
Councillor Murgatroyd.
4.
Councillor O'Donovan.
4.
Councillor Pandor.
4.
Councillor Patrick.
4.
Councillor Patterson.
4.
Councillor Pervez.
4.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock. Councillor Kath Pinnock. Councillor Sarwar.
4.
Councillor Scott.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
Councillor Smage.
4.
Councillor Anthony Smith.
4.
Councillor Richard Smith.
4.
Councillor Sokol.
4.
Councillor John Taylor.
4.
Councillor Kath Taylor.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Turner.
4.
Councillor Uller.
4.
Councillor Uppal.
4.
Councillor Walker.
4.
Councillor Warner.
4.
Councillor Watson. Councillor White.
4.
And Councillor Zaman.
4.
Motion's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That is carried. And thank you very much for your attendance and be safe. Meeting closed. Thank you.